All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I see folks are trickling in now for our student loan clinic with a focus on public service loan forgiveness updates. I know this is so important to our supporters and so important to teachers and nurses and social workers and all of these critically important workers in our space. We're going to get started in just a few minutes here. I want to give folks a moment to jump in. We also have a very special guest, I'm sure you saw, but we do have Congressman Mark Takano, who will be opening with some special comments. I'll introduce him in just a moment. Quick round of housekeeping before we get started. We want to answer as many questions as possible. We're going to go through today's presentation. We will take time for FAQ in between. And also, please use the chat function. Submit your questions there. That's how we at Student Debt Crisis Center and Next Gen Policy and Savi will be able to answer your questions. We'll either do it in the chat, or for those questions that I think are relevant to a lot of people, we'll discuss out loud and make sure that everyone has the details. So let's give it just one more minute and we will get started here. All right. Well, we've got over 100 people on tonight, which is a great showing for an evening workshop. So we thank you all for taking time out of your schedule. I know it's dinner time, possibly even evening if you're somewhere else in the country. But this topic is so important. Before we get into our presentation, I have the great honor to introduce Congressman Mark Takano. Congressman Mark Takano, for over 20 years, has been a public servant himself, both as a high school student or a teacher in the Rialto high school system, and also as a congressman. Mark Takano in 2012 became the first openly gay person of color elected to Congress. He's a trailblazer in that sense. And for this workshop, the congressman has led fights to protect student loan borrowers from for-profit colleges, to discharge the debts of borrowers from these predatory schools. And most importantly, he's currently a member of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Caucus, where Congressman Takano works to ensure the promise of student loan forgiveness for those nurses and teachers and veterans that I was talking about. So with that, I want to pass it to our special guest, Congressman Mark Takano.
Well, thank you very much, Cody. Good evening, everyone. I am Congressman Mark Takano, and I represent California's 41st Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives, which includes the cities of Riverside, Paris, Moreno Valley, and Rupa Valley. I'm honored to be with you all and partner with advocates from the Student Debt Crisis Center and experts from the social impact startup, Savi, to discuss the importance of student loan repayment options, especially the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. As a former public school teacher for over 20 years and a senior and active member of the House Education and Labor Committee, I'm a firm believer in ensuring students are not burdened with outstanding or unsustainable debts as they continue their careers in public service fields. Public service workers of all levels, whether federal, state, local, and including our teachers, military, and select nonprofit organizations, have made the commitment to give back to their community. And we must acknowledge their hard work and dedication in following a public service career path. I've made it a priority to work with my colleagues in Congress to continue rewarding the services of these special borrowers. Now, aside from public service workers, we must also acknowledge the innocent borrowers who were unfortunately defrauded by predatory for-profit institutions, as well as those who experienced school closures during their attempts to continue their education. If your school closed while you were enrolled in classes or soon after you withdrew, or if you were misled through misrepresentations or other fraudulent conduct, you may also be eligible for the discharge of your federal loans. So let me say that again. If your school closed while you were enrolled in classes or soon after you withdrew, or if you were misled through misrepresentations or other fraudulent conduct. You may also be eligible for discharge of your federal student loans. Thank you again for inviting me, and I hope you all look forward to hearing the important update from the Student Debt Crisis Center that will touch on these topics, as well as the innovative work tool that Savi has created to gear you up in the right direction onto a positive financial outlook. So I turn it back to Cody.
Thank you so much, Congressman. For those that just joined us, that was Congressman Mark Takano, who is a champion for student loan borrowers. I had the honor to get to chat with the Congressman before we started, and I was reminding him that he was working on for-profit college abuses and student loan debt before it was cool. And so you are a champion that's been working on this for years. We are so grateful. And I can say, hearing from our supporters who contact us, there are still a lot of borrowers who feel there aren't strong allies in Washington fighting for them. This is a reminder that we sure do have those voices in the highest levels of power fighting to fix this problem. So thank you again, Congressman, and we'll continue to fight alongside you.
My pleasure.
All right, so that was our special guest. Just quick statements from the Congressman. We'll let him go to continue this fight. Now we're going to start the heart of today's discussion, which is a workshop on public service loan forgiveness and other student loan repayment basics. Before we jump in, I just want to remind everyone about who we are and why we're here to talk about this topic today. Again, I'm Cody Hunanian. I'm the Executive Director of the Student Debt Crisis Center. I'm joined today by Sam Sang from Next Gen Policy, who's a great ally of ours here in California. And at the end of this workshop, we will pass it to our partners at Savi. I've got Ian Kuhn and Lindsay Clark, who are some of the most passionate helpers of borrowers, people who are there to make sure borrowers can take advantage of their benefits and relief that the law affords to them. So we've got a great group of people here today, all of them focused on answering your questions. And so with that, I just want to go over one last bit of housekeeping, and then I'll pass it on. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about important updates. We're going to cover the repayment basics. We can't talk about any of these updates without going over some standard student loan information that everybody needs to know. And then we're going to talk about the Pslf Waiver, this huge change to public service loan forgiveness that many of you probably have heard about. That's probably what brought you on today's call. And then at the end, we're going to go over a helpful tool and answer your questions about these programs. All right, with that, I want to pass it to Samantha Sang at NextGen. They're going to cover some basics about the crisis and kind of set the groundwork about why we come to the table to teach people about these issues. Sam, take it away.
All right, thanks, Cody, and thanks everyone again for being here. Like Cody was mentioning, just to give overview of what and recognizing the significant amount of student loan debt out there. Nationally, the average debt owed by per person is $37,000, just over that. And this impacts 45 million Americans with this student loan debt, and that totals to $1.7 trillion nationwide. And on the next slide, we know that this crisis is widespread and crosses into many different communities as well. Older borrowers, those 55 years old and older, are the fastest group of growing borrowers. Women disproportionately hold this debt. About 2/3 of them hold the total student debt amount. Black women have the most debt per borrowers, and over 70% of recent grads have this debt. And we also know that this crisis isn't just going to impact borrowers. There's a domino effect with having this debt. It has a negative impact on wealth. For the average 30-year-old borrower, they have $8,000 less in wealth because of this debt. It does prevent home ownership as well. We've heard many stories. More than half of first-time homebuyers cite student debt as a barrier. And we do know that this, again, disproportionately impacts certain population of borrowers. Certainly our Black and Latinx borrowers are more prone to unemployment, and especially during times of crisis like we saw during the recent COVID-19 pandemic. And taking a look in California, we're going to just spotlight California here on this call for you all, because we are actively trying to change the student debt system and end the crisis. And as one saying goes, where California goes, so does the nation. And so what we've been trying to do here is to impact, and help more than 4 million borrowers in California. And we have a total of $147 billion in debt, with the average student debt being just over $37,000, and more than 500,000 of Californians are behind in their loans. So just to show you kind of what we've done here in California, again, trying to push the envelope wherever we can so we can change that across the nation, in other states or at the federal level. We've joined forces with Student Debt Crisis Center here, Consumer Reports, Student Borrower Protection Center, Young Invincibles, to form the Campaign for California Borrowers' Rights. And we've been really successful in the last couple of years, first with a very large effort to establish the Borrower Bill of Rights. That took in effect January 1st of 2021. So it's been there for over a year now. It bans abusive practices by student loan servicers, adds more protections for specific vulnerable borrower populations. And now we have a student loan ombudsman position in California, which means that if you're here in California, you can turn to the student loan ombudsman in the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, file a complaint, and they'll help you out with your issues that you're having with your servicer. And just recently, last year, we passed AB 424 by Assemblymember Stone to end predatory debt collection practices for those who have private student loans. And so this year, we're looking to provide some real-time support statewide for borrowers with some of the important deadlines that you're going to hear about later on today. We're going to be advocating for more state investment in the state budget and raise these issues statewide through a California resolution. And none of this would be possible without some of the great leaders that you've heard from today, just now, from Congressman Takano and in the California legislature, and especially without the help of borrowers like you all speaking up, signing petitions, sending in letters, engaging in social media. It's truly your stories that move policymakers. So thanks again for being here. Hope this workshop helps you with your student loan journey. And we hope that you'll look for ways to get involved to change student loan policies as well. I'll pass it back to Natalia.
Thank you so much, Sam. And a special thanks to the representative. And thank you all for being here. We have over 250 of you joining us live. So let's get to it. I'm going to go over some important updates, and then we'll get to the meat of this, which is public service loan forgiveness and the deadlines that Sam mentioned. So if you're here, you probably already know that for the majority of student loan borrowers, student loan payments are currently paused. They've been paused since March 13th of 2020. So we're about to hit in a couple of weeks that 2-year mark of no payments. As I said, the majority of borrowers, those are direct loans, and the non-commercially held FFEL loans are included. This suspension, this time, as long as you've been working in a public service job, counts towards public service loan forgiveness. I would count if you were in default to default rehabilitation. In addition, it also counts towards your income-based repayment programs as well. There's been important relief for borrowers in default. For borrowers in default, employers are instructed to halt wage garnishments. There should be no wage garnishments, no tax or social security withholdings, and the collection calls that so many borrowers that we hear from receive, harassing calls from their loan servicer or collection agents, those have been on pause as well for almost 2 years now. Some other updates beyond the pandemic pause that's going on right now. The congressman mentioned this a bit during his remarks, that those who have attended for-profit colleges are entitled to relief, especially, that have been defrauded. Excuse me. The borrower defense, we've seen the Department of Education now cancel over $1 billion, which is a far cry from the trillions of dollars that we need to cancel, but nonetheless still canceled $1 billion in student loan debt for those scammed by for-profit colleges such as ITT Tech and DeVry. DeVry was just added last week. We've also seen stronger enforcement for borrowers with disability being able to finally get the relief they're entitled to through permanent and total disability. And also the department will suspend tax refunds or Social Security offsets via your tax refund 6 months after payments are turned on, if they are turned on May 1st. So continuing on, we've seen with loan servicers that we've seen many federal loan servicers exit the market. Navient, FedLoan, which is important for those of you with public service loan forgiveness, and Granite State are no longer going to be servicing federal student loans. You do not need to do anything. They will notify you of a servicer change, but this is just for you to know to look out for if you are one of these customers. We have seen that approximately 16 million student loan borrowers, or 35% of student loan borrowers, will be getting a new loan servicer with this process. And Fed Loan Servicing, as I just mentioned, is the sole company that was doing public service loan forgiveness, and you may still be dealing with Fed Loan, but Mohia will be taking over from Fed Loan. So what to do next if you're one of these folks? Make sure your contact information is up to date. This way, they'll stay alerted when the transfer is taking place. And if there are any actions you need to take, open your email from your new servicer. You may think it's a scam email. We're getting a lot of those as well if you're student loan borrowers, but just make sure to read the communication if you are one of those borrowers. Unfortunately, because the system is not great, and as many people know, broken, it's important to save copies of your payment history and as much documentation as you can as a way of ensuring the information is accurate and the transfer is complete. And set a reminder so you can be sure to log in to the new servicer's website and verify your information. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Cody, who's going to talk to you about public service loan forgiveness.
All right, so this is a really exciting time for public service workers. And I've seen folks in the chat, they're asking like, well, first, what do we mean by a public service worker? So a public service worker can be a wide set of folks who work for nonprofits, the government, and other specialty services that we all depend on. And we're going to dive into that in just a second. But what's been really exciting is that this public service loan forgiveness program, which has been around since 2007, hasn't provided the relief that we expected. And so the Department of Education announced a limited waiver. This is a temporary change of the rules until October of this year that will allow payments by student loan borrowers to count towards public service loan forgiveness, regardless of the loan program or the repayment plan that they were in. I'm going to explain shortly, but there were all these cracks in the system that allowed people who thought they were going to get loan forgiveness to be blocked out of the system. And this temporary short-term change of the rules could be your way in. The Department of Education is also going to review previous PSLF applications for errors and also give borrowers the ability to reapply, have their applications reconsidered. And this is huge because I've seen even in the chat, there are people on today's call that have already applied for public service loan forgiveness and have been denied that could qualify. I also saw a borrower on here who's joined us for many workshops. They were sent a letter saying that their loan forgiveness application was denied and had their loans forgiven just a few days, a few weeks after that. So this is huge. This really can work for borrowers. We're hearing about it. And lastly, a lot of the things we're going to talk about when it comes to this waiver, this overhaul of the rules, will be automatic. So for some borrowers, there's very little that will need to be done to get advanced access into public service loan forgiveness further into the program than they had ever been before. So I already touched on it, but under these new rules that I'm about to explain, 22,000 people will receive immediate loan forgiveness. Again, these are people that should have already had their student loans forgiven under the program, but by whatever technicalities haven't. So it's 22,000 extra people. There's 27,000 people who will receive loan forgiveness by just adding their employment certification, meaning you're just telling the government you work for one of these employers. It's just one small step. And then there's 550,000, 500,000 people out there who will have additional credit made towards the program under these new rules. All right, so I've kind of laid the groundwork of why we're here talking about this waiver and why it's so important. Let's take a step back now. Let's talk about what public service loan forgiveness is. So the public service loan forgiveness program started in 2007. This was passed during the Bush administration. It had bipartisan support, and it's obvious why, because we want to encourage Americans to pursue jobs in healthcare, social work, teachers, and other areas that are unfortunately underpaid, but critically important. The way the program works is you have to make 120 monthly payments or 10 years, and it doesn't have to be consecutive, it can be cumulative. And you need to make 120 payments while you meet a narrow set of qualifying factors. And I'm going to explain those factors here in a moment. At the end of that, if you've made your 120 monthly payments, all of your remaining debt can be forgiven, and it's forgiven tax-free. So this is a huge, huge relief for borrowers who qualify under the program. So typically, the way public service loan forgiveness works is you have to be paying back a federal direct loan. There are other types of loans called FFEL loans and Perkins loans that typically would not qualify. I'm going to show you in just a minute how this new waiver changes that. You have to have the right employer, and I'm going to get into that, but again, it's a 501c3 or government employer. And you have to be enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan. That too has been expanded on these new rules. To apply for the program, you document your employment using the public service loan forgiveness form, meaning you let them know that you work for a qualifying employer. And at the end of that, after you've made your 120 monthly payments, you submit an application for your final application to receive loan forgiveness. So again, these direct loans were newer loans, especially those that were issued from the government after 2010. Direct loans are the type of loan where the Department of Education is your lender directly, meaning the government gives you the money. This can be a subsidized or an unsubsidized loan. Sometimes that terminology throws folks off. And these direct loans are federal loans no matter what type of school you pay for. So private schools can be paid for with federal student loans. Just because you went to a private school doesn't mean you have private loans that we're not talking about today. These FFEL loans are older loans before 2010. These are the type of loans in which the Department of Education would guarantee the loan, but you would have a private bank as the lender. Again, these can also be subsidized or unsubsidized loans. So there's a lot of confusion. Many borrowers are not sure what type of federal student loan they have. And again, these are schools that can be paid for, public or private schools. It doesn't really matter. Federal student loans can be applied to many types of institutions. Now, I talked about that the traditional rules require that you're in a qualifying repayment plan. Traditionally, that would mean that you're in the 10-year standard plan, which is just the automatic plan a borrower enters when they are completed with their program. That means that you have monthly payments that are the same every month for 10 years. And at the end of that, your payments or your student loan is paid off. So you can be in the 10-year standard plan, and that can qualify for public service loan forgiveness, but it doesn't really make sense because you're going to pay off your loan at the end of that 10 years. So traditionally, a borrower will actually be enrolled in what we call an income-driven repayment plan. This is a type of student loan repayment plan that lowers your monthly payment based on your income. It's no longer about how much total debt you have. It's about your family size and your income. And there's a formula that the government uses to calculate what your monthly payment should be. I'm not going to get into the details of all the plans, but there are, about 5 IDR plans that people are familiar with. You can see them listed here: revised pay-as-you-earn, income-based repayment, and income contingent repayment. That is kind of the magic sauce for public service loan forgiveness. If you enroll in an income-driven repayment plan and you lower your monthly payments, then at the end of 10 years, you'll have maximized the amount of student loans that are left for it to be forgiven under the public service loan forgiveness. So in reality, even though you can be in the standard repayment or the income-driven repayment plan and meet the qualifying factors for public service loan forgiveness, the income-driven repayment plan is really the only option that's going to make sure that you benefit from the program. And I've touched on this a couple of times, so I won't spend too much time on it, but for the purposes of public service loan forgiveness, you need to be working for either a 501c3 nonprofit or a government agency. On the 501c3 side, that can be a charity, can be a nonprofit healthcare facility, nonprofit school, legal aid services, and many, many more. There's an estimate that public service loan forgiveness covers up to 1 in 4 workers in America. On the government side, public safety workers like firefighters, police, first responders, public health like nurses, staff, people who work in public education, and anyone who works for government. And what's really important here is that it's not about what your job is, but it's about who your employer is. So if you worked at City Hall, even if you worked on the landscaping team or you were doing secretarial work, if your employer, the person who pays you, signs your checks, is a nonprofit or government, you qualify for this program. So I've dived into what the qualifications were before these new rules, and I'm going to just underline them here. Before these new rules that we're going to talk about, the waiver, you had to work for a qualifying employer, and that again was all levels of government, 501c3 nonprofits, other critical public service careers, and you had to be currently working for one of these qualifying employers when you apply for public service loan forgiveness. On the loan side, you had to have a direct subsidized or unsubsidized loan, a direct Graduate Plus loan, or a direct consolidated loan. And that consolidated loan can include an older FFEL loan that was consolidated or a Parent Plus loan that was consolidated. But you can see here down the row, it's direct, direct, direct. And again, one last time, for the repayment plan, you had to be in the 10-year standard repayment, an income-driven repayment plan, or, they had to be on time and full monthly payments. Those rules created all sorts of problems. Many people spent 10 years working in a nonprofit just to find out that they had the wrong type of loan. Many found out they were on the wrong repayment plan. Many had their employment certification denied, even though they qualified and they were working for a qualifying employer. And many had payments that were a day late or payments that were lost in the application or the billing process that weren't applied for public service loan forgiveness. All of these minor issues meant that tens and hundreds of thousands of people haven't received loan forgiveness as they expected. So here's the new rules. After the Pslf waiver, and remember, these extended, expanded rules are only eligible until October of this year. So that's why we're really urgently hosting these events. But under these new rules, you can be retired at the time of applying. So you still need to be working or have worked at one of these 501c3 nonprofits or government agency. But as long as you made 120 payments while working for one of these qualifying employers since 2007, you can have your loans forgiven no matter where you currently work. So I saw some folks in the chat who said, I was a teacher for 20 years and I retired 2 years ago. Can I still apply? And the answer right now is yes, you can. On the loan side, again, we had all those direct loans. but any of the other previously denied federal student loans can count. So an FFEL loan can count, Perkins loan can count. What you have to do is consolidate, but any time previously will count towards your 120 monthly payments. So that's huge. Similarly, on the repayment plan side, we had the 10-year standard, we had the income-driven repayment plans. Now, the department's going to be looking at your payment history. If it's on time-ish, meaning it was close to when your payment was due, and it was full-ish, meaning the payment was close to your full amount. And I know those are not scientific terms, but if they're close, the Department of Education will apply those payments towards your 120 monthly payments. And any of the federal repayment programs that are eligible now count. So I used to hear from borrowers for years who were in an extended repayment, graduated repayment, or extended graduated repayment plan. And those folks would be in those plans for 10 years just to find out they no longer qualified. That's no longer the case, at least until October of this year. All right, I'm going to pass it over to our friends at Savi. I think Lindsay is going to take the reins from here. We'll jump into what to do next. We'll talk about the Savi tool, and then we'll do some more Q&A at the end of this. Lindsay, you're up.
Great, thanks, Cody. And I'm trying to answer as many questions as I can in the chat. I'm appreciating all of you guys sort of putting your situations out there. And it really sounds like many of you have spent significant time in the public sector as public servants. And despite perhaps being later on in your career, it sounds from what you all are telling me that many of you are going to be eligible to take advantage of this waiver. So I am very, very excited and can't wait to get back to answering each of your questions. But despite, even if you are retired now, you are able to retroactively receive that forgiveness. So I hope this is going to be a life-changing night for so many of you. Okay. So I'm going to sort of walk you through, what to do next around this Pslf waiver, because, as much as we try to break down things and, make them as simple as possible, the Pslf, program was complicated to begin with. And this waiver only creates, honestly, more questions than answers oftentimes. So I'm sort of going to run through basically, different scenarios based on your situation that will help you determine the next steps and sort of help you understand where your eligibility lies. So first and foremost, around this Pslf waiver, the first thing that you need to make sure to do is establish what type of student loans you have, federal student loans, that is. All right. Now you can find the type of loans you have by logging into your federal student aid account at studentaid.gov. And you can visit the My Aid page and you can scroll down and there's sort of a loan breakdown section there. And there you'll find a list of each and every federal loan you have ever borrowed in your entire life that is basically, attached to your name. Even if you've paid off the loan or consolidated into a new loan, it will still be there. And what you're going to look for when you're looking at that list of your federal student loans is the word direct. Okay. The direct loan program began in 2010. So if you have a loan from 2010 to present, there's a 99% chance that it is already going to be a direct loan. Again, the easiest way to tell, looking for the word direct. If you have one of these older loan types known as a FFEL loan, FFEL loan, which stands for Federal Family Education Loan, this was the loan program in existence prior to 2010. And so if you have a FFEL loan, you're going to be looking for the acronym FFEL, FFEL. It should state it right there. And you might have a Perkins loan, another type of older loan. And if you do, it would say Perkins. So you're looking for direct, FFEL, or Perkins, okay? And based on what you see there, I'm going to sort of break down what your next steps are going to be. So on this next slide, let's say you have at least one federal loan, okay? And it is a direct loan. So on that, on your My Aid section, you saw the word direct. Okay, your loan is a direct loan. From here, these are the steps you need to take in order to be able to basically explore your eligibility and make sure that you are doing whatever you can to benefit from this expanded eligibility of the program. So first and foremost, oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. let's say you have one federal loan that is not a direct loan. I can't read tonight. So it's not a direct loan. It is either a FFEL loan or a Perkins loan, okay? FFEL or Perkins, all right? You didn't see the word direct. So the first thing that you're going to need to do if you have a FFEL or Perkins loan is you are going to need to submit a consolidation application. That's the first step before anything else. Now, I know many of you might have heard in the past that consolidating your loan basically resets that loan and starts you back at zero. But that's what this Pslf waiver actually changes. It's still going to now be able to count previous payments you made, but it's sort of a technicality here. In order for that older FFEL or Perkins loan to become eligible under this waiver, it still needs to be consolidated first. So if you've got the older FFEL or Perkins, you need to consolidate the loan. If you've already paid them off, you don't need to consolidate. Unfortunately, if you've already paid off your loans, you're not eligible to take advantage of this PSLF program. And unfortunately, they don't provide any retroactive payment now that this is available. Okay, so after you've consolidated the loan, the next step, and you're going to consolidate that loan with Fed loan servicing, all right? It'll walk you through it when you do it on the studentaid.gov website. The next thing you need to do is submit a PSLF employment certification form. This PSLF form, we'll call it PSLF form, is the one and only form for the PSLF program, okay? There is one form and one form only, and it's basically known as the employment certification form. It gets signed off by you, the borrower. It gets signed off by your employer, basically certifying that they are an eligible employer and that you have worked there from, during a certain period of time or, from one date to, currently, and then it gets submitted to Fed loan servicing, okay? Once it's submitted, Fed loan reviews it and then assesses how many qualifying payments you've made. And that's when you are sort of awarded your PSLF credits, all right? And you will, if you have a servicer that is not Fed loan, let's say you have any other servicer right now, right? When you submit that PSLF form for the first time, it will move your loans over to Fed loan, okay? And you will start to have a Fed loan account where you'll be able to check things like your payment amounts and also keep track of your PSLF credits, all right? So again, you need to consolidate. If you don't have a direct loan right now, you have an older loan, you need to consolidate first, then submit the employment certification form. If you do it the other way around, you won't get it accepted. Now, let's say you are unsure. Oh, sorry, if you go up 1 second, unsure about your employer's eligibility. You can use the PSLF help tool, which is again available at studentaid.gov/PSLF. All right. And there's a whole overview and info section there that basically documents, everything that you need to know, what we're showing you here with links to be able to take that action. All right. Now, one sort of additional thing here, the PSLF help tool is still sort of in progress, I should say, and has not yet been fully updated. And so for borrowers with these older types of loans, you, like I said, will need to consolidate. You're not able to submit any type of PSLF form through that tool until later on this year. All right. So consolidation first, then the PSLF form. Okay. Now on to the next scenario. Let's say you have direct loans. So you saw the word direct. Okay. And you're even farther ahead. You have already submitted a PSLF form. All right. Meaning you have already certified some period of your employment for the PSLF program and received eligible PSLF credits. This means you are with the servicer Fed loan. You already have a Fed loan account. So if you've already applied for PSLF, okay, like I said, and had some of that employment certified, the Department of Education is supposed to be awarding you any additional payments that you might be eligible for automatically, meaning you wouldn't have to take additional or further action to be able to claim those, okay? So I'll repeat that. If you already have a Fed loan account and you have direct loans and you have already submitted a PSLF form at some point, over your employment history, and that employment has been certified, so you have PSLF credits that you can see in your account. If you are eligible to receive any additional credits, they would have been applied automatically to your account. Now, federal student aid might reach out to you to certify any additional periods of employment that they need to in order to make that happen. So I would say make sure that you are staying on top of your email and looking out for communications from federal student aid or Fed loan, letting you know that you would be eligible. And I would say most of the people who are in this sort of bucket have already received those communications and have already received that automatic forgiveness, or I should say those automatic additional credits to their account. So that was sort of the first wave of borrowers back in the fall. Okay, on to the next scenario. Let's say you have direct loans. So again, you saw the word direct in your My Aid section, okay? However, you've never submitted any type of form or anything for the PSLF program, all right? Now, let me just tell you, that is most people out there. The majority of people who are potentially eligible based on their employer for public service loan forgiveness have never submitted any form for the program, okay? And that's totally fine. In fact, what it just means is that it is in your best interest to submit that form before October 31st, because you need to do so in order to be able to take advantage of potentially any of these retroactive credits that you deserve during this waiver period. So if you've never done it before, that's okay. But my message to you is now is the time to do it. So you're going to want to submit a PSLF employment certification form, okay, to Fed Loan Servicing. Now, if you have multiple employers, okay, previous employers that are eligible employers, you will need to submit a separate form for each period of employment. Anything back until October of 2007 is basically eligible and fair game. The program began in October of 2007, so nothing before that it matters. Not payment-wise, not employment-wise. They're only looking starting October 2007 to present, okay? So again, it's retroactive. If you've had 5 periods of employment during that time, all with qualifying employers, you will need 5 employment certification forms, all right? Which is a lot. It can be sort of a daunting administrative process. And my colleague Ian is going to talk to you all in a little bit about how we created Savi to be able to help borrowers like you all navigate and actually cross that administrative finish line by taking on some of that paperwork for you. So for those who are submitting this employment certification form or forms for the first time, word of warning. There is a delay, and it's going to be delayed more than usual in terms of processing time. So normally what might take 3 to 4 weeks is now maybe taking closer to 2 months, maybe 3 months or more, okay, for Fed Loan to basically communicate back with you, the borrower, that your form has maybe not only been received, but that it's been accepted. Now, what happens to a borrower who is waiting to hear from Fed Loan and deep down inside, just ridden with anxiety because they're not, confident that they're either eligible or they just don't trust that this is going to work out, right? It sounds too good to be true. Well, that's one of the reasons why I think determining your eligibility and having that security before you submit that is important, because that will help definitely mentally set your expectations. And if you know that it's going to be a waiting game, you're able to sort of ride that storm a little bit longer. All right. But again, you must submit this employment certification form or forms by October 31st of this year. If you don't, you won't be able to take advantage of these expanded eligibility requirements. All right. Meaning you won't be able to accumulate credit for payments that you made that potentially were, originally ineligible, now are eligible, right? You won't be able to take advantage of that. So this PSLF waiver is not a physical thing. It's not a form or anything. It's simply representative of a period of time from this past October to this coming October 31st, during which borrowers like you who are potentially eligible can submit the right documentation to have their cases reviewed and basically have their PSLF credits accurately, or I should say reassessed, and any eligible credits added. And hopefully that could push you over the 120 if you aren't already. Okay, on to the next scenario. So let's say you tried to certify your employment at some point in time, but were denied or rejected by Fed Loan. So if this is you, okay, so you've tried to apply for PSLF and been rejected from the program. First of all, you are not alone. just to, give everyone some context here, 2007 was the first year of the program. So in 2017, 10 years later, the first year that borrowers were going to be eligible to apply, right? 100,000 borrowers applied for PSLF and less than 1% were accepted. And as Cody talked about, it was because of those technicalities like loan type and repayment plan, all those silly things that they were denied. So it is very actually, reasonable if you had previously been rejected. And if that's the case, you are going to want to resubmit that exact same application, those employment certification forms again. Okay, that's what is going to trigger sort of a reassessment and re-review of your account. So even if you've been denied 2 years ago, all right, that was under the old rules, you're going to need to resubmit that employment certification form now so that your loan situation can be reassessed under this new eligibility. Okay. Now, one just sort of minor side note here, these new updates that have come about because of the Pslf waiver really do not impact the qualifying employer rules. All right, those still remain very much the same, either a nonprofit 501c3 organization or any type of government entity, federal, state, local, or tribal. Okay, so public schools, any type of public service that is run through the government is eligible. So it's a lot more people than often would seem normal. So, but again, that is going to remain the same. You need to work for a qualifying employer. It does not matter in what capacity you work for that employer. You could be janitorial, administrative, nurse, doesn't matter. All that matters is what is on your W-2 form. Who is your technical employer, all right? Okay, so again, if you were denied, you're resubmitting that employment certification form as soon as possible. All right, moving on to the next slide. So let's just run through a quick bit of FAQs just to sort of capture some of the biggest pain points that I've seen borrowers get confused around. So can I get prior payments to count if they were made before I applied for PSLF? Yes. This is retroactive. So again, anything from October 2007 to present is fair game. Okay, so you can get those payments to count. Does the October deadline mean we have to apply for forgiveness by that time or be enrolled in the program? So yes, that October forgiveness does not mean, or I should say that October deadline, okay, October 31st of this year, does not mean that you need to have reached 120 payments before then. It simply means you need to just submit the application, the employment certification form by that date, okay? You might accumulate future employment and qualifying payments in the future, and that's fine. And at a certain later point, you will submit it again. But to have any of your repayment history from basically October 31st, going backwards, reassessed and get any eligible credits that you can, you need to submit those forms before the end of October. Last but not least, I noticed that loan servicers are changing. Should I wait for that? Absolutely not. If you are trying to apply for PSLF right now under the waiver, you need to do so ASAP. You need to submit these documents to FedLoan, even though FedLoan is no longer going to be a servicer come 12 months from now. Their contract has been extended specifically to manage this program, and this waiver is part of that. And so you need to submit these documents to FedLoan, not Mohila, not anyone else, to FedLoan right away, because they are taking a bit longer given the volume in the surge and interest from borrowers. You'd want to submit it as soon as possible. There's absolutely no reason to wait. Okay, so what to do next is sort of a recap here. There are definitely more important sort of updates to come. And I think, we're waiting to find out more clarity as to how the PSLF program will hopefully continue to sort of expand and improve and make it a lot easier for borrowers to actually achieve this forgiveness. Because despite, what a great sort of positive step this was, it's still really complicated, almost too complicated, and it shouldn't be. But for now, the official fact sheet that you can reference around PSLF can be found at studentdebtcrisis.org. And you can also let the SDCC team know by checking a box if you'd like them to keep you informed. You can sign up for their mailing list, which I highly recommend. And then last but not least, if you're interested in applying for PSLF, you can sign up with the Savi tool that my colleague Ian is going to walk you through in a second to basically receive up-to-date information, personalized support through this process. That's basically why we founded our company and what we're here to do. And like I said, we're going to talk to you about that in a second. But we work closely with SDCC to be able to provide borrowers like you with a free service and tool to be able to achieve PSLF. So we look forward to hopefully being able to help you do that. Okay, I think I'm going to be turning it over to my colleague Ian, who, like I said, is going to be walking you through this Savi tool, give you a little bit of background on us and take it from there. Ian?
Yes, thanks, Lindsay. I'm here. The great part, it's been 50 minutes of lots of learning, lots of facts, but lots of federal bureaucracy, lots of challenging policies, lots of feels like ever-changing targets. And so while I'm sure many of you were taking very scrupulous notes and asking wonderful questions, there's just no way to expect anyone to be able to memorize all of this. You all have full-time jobs as first responders, as nurses, as public workers, as anything else besides being student loan experts. And that is what we are here to do at Savi. So just like you would have someone to help you fix your car, to help you do your taxes, to help with any of these other, confusing systems, we are here to help with your student loans as well. So we're a public benefit corporation, which really in short means that we're here to help the public good. Our bottom line is to be able to help people. We benefit when you benefit. When you get forgiveness, that's when we succeed as well. We have a whole online resource. So I know some people said that they, were not able to follow along as well, since we were moving so quick to cover everything student loans in just 1 hour. So we have the online resource. We have a whole team of student loan experts that are also available for you at any turn as you need. And like I said, all these things that we've talked through of checking for loan forgiveness, for teacher loan forgiveness, knowing when your next deadline is, when your due date is, how much forgiveness you'll get, when that will happen, being able to sign all these forms online so you can always see where they're at in the process. There's no abyss of never just knowing, having all these questions. You always know what's going on and where you're at in this process of, tackling your student loan debt, payments, and forgiveness. The other great part, a lot of people are asking about, specific timelines and stuff as well. There are these forms with income-driven repayment plans and with public service loan forgiveness that need to be filled out every single year. So just like, taxes every single year, there is student loan paperwork every single year that needs to be filled out as well for these programs. We help you do that digitally, 100% digital and 100% free as part of this partnership with the Student Debt Crisis Center and their whole, team and allyship here as well. So I know we're running a little bit short on time and I want to make sure that we have a couple minutes for questions, but I just want to run through a couple of screenshots here. So when you get to this website, if you choose, to think this is amazing, I've never had help with my students' loans before, but golly gee, do I need it? There's no surprises waiting for you on the other side. So there is a link in the chat. I'm sure Cody and Lindsay have got that in the chat already, but it is, if anyone's dialed in, it is app.bysavi, bysavi.com/register/borrowers. That'll take you to this free login, free account to be able to do all of this with Savi as your student loan ally. Once you get logged in, it's 100% safe, secure. None of your data is sold. Like I said, this is funded through grant work and our partnership together. So there's no security risks or issues to need to worry about there. You'll land at your student loan dashboard that has tons of resources available to you, as well as being able to sign up for future webinars. You'll be able to also sync all of your loan servicers. So like myself, I have private and federal loan servicers. I can see those all in one spot. You'd be able to see how many, public service loan forgiveness credits that are already certified with FedLoan, plus the projection of what we've estimated, based on all of the details that you provided, what you should have, get to see that discrepancy on that. But the kind of, I like to say meat and potatoes of it all starts with this questionnaire. So that big continue application button, it may say start your application as well if you're new, walks you through this questionnaire. So it looks just, very similar to online tax software, but much easier. Everything in here is designed to save you money. So even things like how many, child dependents do you have? That's $50 less per month on an income-driven repayment plan that you have to pay just by having kids. So there's all sorts of things that add up and are being able to save you money every single month. Going through and answering some of these questions, you can see, live estimates and updates throughout the whole process. You're able to put in your employment history from 2007 to date. So if you're thinking you might be eligible for loan forgiveness, I would really encourage you to put that employment history all the way back to 2007. There's 1.7 million employers in that system that it will say eligible, not eligible, eligible, not eligible, and sort that out for you. So there's, again, no guessing game. That is many, many, many more employers than the Federal Department of Ed's tool has, and this is updated for this PSLF waiver period. It was great they announced the waiver period, but building technology has never been the federal government's strong suit, as we all are very aware of. The last big step here that you'll see is syncing your loans with Plaid. If you've used online accounts, Venmo, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, anyone like that, online banking, you've used Plaid before, you may just not have known it, but it ties together online financial accounts, gives it a safe, secure, industry-leading, read-only snapshot. So this is how we can see, what your loans are, what type they are, how many payments they are, what that interest rate is, and all of that jazz, so that we can match it up, oftentimes against your employment history to say, we were working, this X number of years, we were paying our loans this X number of years. That overlapping timeline, that's that beautiful sweet spot right in the middle where we'd be able to tell you if you are eligible for loan forgiveness. And I believe there's maybe one last screenshot here. Yep, so this is where it gives you those options and says, at the end of the day, we have just a couple years left until we're done repaying. We know we're gonna get 14,000 forgiven. We know when it's gonna happen. We know what plan we're gonna be on. We know the interest rate. All these kind of unknowns, in this federal loan field for a lot of people, they are right here in one screen for you. If this sounds great, you're ready to go. You're welcome to hit select, continue, file all that paperwork digitally every year, and we'll be with you that whole process. A lot of times, going through this, it sounds like from the chat, people are going to see a really cool message that says, hey, you've worked for public service for 10 years. You might be eligible right now for loan forgiveness and get expedited through this tool as well. So I definitely would encourage, I can be very cynical myself. If there's any other fellow cynics on the phone, if you've applied before, got denied, if you've never applied and thought 99% denial rate, like, shoot, I am not that special. I am not the 1% that's going to get it. I would strongly encourage you to apply again, try again, because this is a really life-changing time, like Lindsay said, for public service workers. Oh, and then last but not least, there is the ability to, of course, contact support. I mentioned that whole human team of people, of all my colleagues and coworkers we have. You're always welcome to send them a message as well if you need help along the way. All right, back to you, Natalia and Cody.
Great. So let's take some questions. And Lindsay, do we still have you? Our resident PSLF expert?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
I
great.
turned off my video while I was feverishly trying to type responses in the chat. So
no worries. Well, we have a few minutes left. So I'm going to pass it to Cody to start questions.
Yeah, so I've got a ton of questions here. I think a lot of these are going to apply to many of the people. So hopefully by the time we get through these questions, most questions will be answered. I'm going to start with one that I got several times, but folks wanted to just clarify. Are we saying that under these new rules, you can be retired right now and still qualify for public service zone forgiveness under these new rules that are part of the waiver?
Yeah, Cody, I'm happy to take that. So the answer is yes. Under the original rules of the program, when you had reached 120 and were able to, finally submit that final PSLF form and apply for, forgiveness at that point, you had to remain not only employed at that eligible employer at the time you submitted the application, but you had to remain employed up until the point at which your loans were actually forgiven. Okay, which you saw those $0 balances. And for many people, that was taking upwards of 6, 8, 12 months sometimes for FedLoan to process those applications, at which point, they were planning on retiring, long ago. So under this PSLF waiver, they've eliminated that rule. And that means that any borrower, regardless of whether you are currently employed, if you have previously, retroactively, made 120 payments on your federal student loans starting October 2007 right to present. And during those payment periods, you were also working for a qualifying employer. Okay. Those two things alone, if you've made 120 payments, you'll be eligible. Again, 120 payments before you retired, right? Before you ended that employment, you would be eligible to receive full forgiveness on your student loan balance. So it's really important because there are a lot of people out there who have no idea that this is happening and who are sitting there and would definitely be eligible because they've made well over 120 payments on their student loans. Back to you, Cody.
Yeah, Lindsay, I want to throw one more your way here quickly. Just following up on that, I'm seeing from a lot of borrowers that tried to apply for public service zone forgiveness. Then they tried to apply for temporary expanded public service zone forgiveness, which we didn't even talk about today, but that was Congress's attempt to try to fix this program a few years ago. Now we have this new waiver. So if you're one of these people that's currently applying under the temporary expanded public service zone forgiveness, what are you supposed to do right now? Are you supposed to just kind of reapply under these new waiver rules? It's just a mess. Even I'm confused, and I work on this topic every day.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So I would say that in order to basically ensure that your situation is fully, reviewed and you are going to be able to benefit from the maximum amount of credits that you possibly could have accumulated during that period of time, regardless of whether you were trying to pursue PSLF or perhaps TEPSLF, because there were different sort of eligibility requirements for both. Doesn't even matter. Don't worry about it. You're going to get credit for both. Okay. What matters now is basically that you just submit this employment certification form for any and all employment periods. Again, okay, even if you have already certified this employment at some point in the past, it might have been missing certain payment periods, or it might not have certified the entire length of the employment. Basically, when you submitted these forms, it was assessing your situation under the old rules. So I would say the best advice I can give anyone is don't try to self-select here. Like the one thing that you need to do in order to ensure that you are going to get the fair shake here, regardless of TEPSLF, PSLF, is all going to be the same under this waiver, is just to submit another employment certification form or forms for as many of those employers as you have, starting back 2007 to present, and get those into FedLoan as soon as possible. That's what will trigger a re-review of your account. And that's the only thing that will. So that's my best advice there.
Great. If you're confused, I'm also confused. These are a ton of different programs. I think we've talked about it already during today's presentation, but these programs aren't perfect. They're a bit of a layer cake. They're confusing, but they do work. They work for people when it comes to forgiving their loans, which can be life-changing. So, bear with the confusion, bear with all the changes, and just continue to work towards your application and getting this relief, because it is so important for people and their families. I want to address a couple of questions that are, I think, part of the same sentiment that a few teachers and professors have asked. I had Carly and Donovan and a few others ask about what if you worked at several different education institutions during the last 10 years. And so I want to remind folks, if I wasn't clear, I just want to clarify, you can, for the purposes of public service zone forgiveness, combine all of your qualifying employment. It does not have to be consecutive, and it doesn't even have to be at the same employer. But if you worked for multiple qualifying employers, you can have all of that count. You will have to certify your employment for each one. So that could be tricky for someone who's had multiple jobs, but that still counts. And for Donovan's case, this was someone who not only has worked at several different locations, but this is an adjunct professor, and they wanted to know if that met the full-time requirements. Donovan, that poses its own obstacles. I have heard from adjunct professors who, because of their schedule throughout the year, even though when they are working, they're working quite a heavy workload, that their employment does not average 30 hours a week. So being an adjunct professor can be a bit tricky for public service zone forgiveness. It is just a reminder to everyone that this requirement is an average of 30 hours per week or full-time employment status as is defined by your employer. But unfortunately, adjunct professors have really fit kind of a gray area there that's not covered well by these rules. All right, another question.
Sorry, I was going to just add one thing to that, which is basically, if your employer is willing to sign off on the fact that you work more than 30 hours or more a week, like I know one of the things with adjuncts is sometimes, you technically might work 1 hour a week, but then others, it might be 60 to 80. But if they're, and it might not be the whole necessarily entire year, but it really comes down to whether your HR employer will basically sign off that you are employed there. And so really it's up to them to basically check that box. So just wanted to throw that out there because I've seen situations where borrowers have just been able to, to get that signed off when, they might've been told, oh no, adjuncts, aren't eligible. Definitely ask your employer and try to get those signed.
And Lindsay, I see Rhonda and a few others ask this question. What happens if a borrower's application isn't fully processed come October? What happens then?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely, I think, unavoidable in many situations just because of the delays in Fed loan right now. But so long as you submitted the form before October 31st, this is what the department's telling us, then even if your processing time goes past that date, you'll still be eligible to take advantage of the expanded eligibility. So it's really just getting it in, before that date. However, I mean, if you were able to get this in as soon as possible and perhaps determine that you're eligible for immediate, automatic forgiveness right now, then that changes everything. You don't have to think about going back into repayment, right? So definitely don't wait. But like I said, if it does extend past that deadline for some reason, then you will be okay. You won't be not able to take advantage of the program. It's just, you got to get it in before that deadline.
Yeah, that October deadline for submitting the application right now is huge. I'll say, as an advocate, we feel that that's unfair and we're working to make this permanent. There's nothing on the books yet, so stay tuned. But I think we all agree that trying to get millions of or hundreds of thousands of people through an application process in less than a year will be a huge challenge. All right, I've got Deborah and a few others that asked about deferment, and I want to clarify the section that I talked about. When I discussed the new waiver rules, I told everyone here that now all of the federal repayment programs qualified. But I want to be clear, what I mean by that is that you have to be an active repayment. So you could be in, excuse me, you could be in an income-driven repayment plan as low as $0 per month, meaning you don't pay anything. Your expected monthly payment is $0. And you could qualify because you're technically making a $0 monthly payment. But if you applied for a deferment or a forbearance, that means your payments have been on pause. That time does not qualify for public service zone forgiveness, and it still does not qualify under these new rules. That is my blanket statement. I'm going to add one caveat here that is going to throw a wrench into it. But I've seen several people also remind us that we have technically been in an administrative forbearance for the entirety of the pandemic for most federal student loan borrowers. That time does count. So deferment and forbearance typically would not count. So if you previously had a hardship, financial hardship, and you applied for forbearance, it wouldn't count. But if you're just actively receiving the pandemic relief that has been happening since March of 2020, then you are having that time count. And so if you really think about it, many of us will have, over 2 years of PSLF credits added to our 120 count just in this 2 years of making no payments. That's huge. And so that's called administrative forbearance. That counts. It's different than typical deferment and forbearance, which would not count even under these new rules. All right, let's see here. I am, Lizzie, I'm hearing from a lot of people who are saying they've reached out to FedLoan or their loan servicer and they just haven't heard back. And I know you are dealing with this right now. So what is your advice to folks who are actively trying to do the right thing and don't feel like they're making any progress?
Yeah. So I would say, if you already have a FedLoan account, making sure that you have your contact information updated and you're able to check the PSLF section of that account where you should be able to see, because I was just on with a borrower earlier today, it'll basically show you, the status of any sort of documentation. Let's say you submitted this PSLF form, it'll tell you that it's still under review and processing. So I would make sure that you're very active on your FedLoan account. Now, let's say you don't have a FedLoan account because you've been with another servicer and this is the first time you're submitting these. Well, it's definitely a tricky process. And a borrower on the webinar this evening who ended up getting full forgiveness can attest to this. But if you submit the application to FedLoan and you don't hear anything, not even a confirmation that it was accepted or received, you, me, all of us would get a little worried, right? And be a little concerned as to what the status was. And unfortunately, you can't call FedLoan because you don't have a FedLoan account yet. So they won't have any record of you to be able to give you any updates. And so what I would recommend doing is waiting at least a month, okay? I would say is sort of processing time once these are submitted. If you're worried if the form was submitted properly, we're happy to help submit that for you digitally to make sure that it actually was received by the servicer. At Savi, when we submit them, we can guarantee that if you are concerned. But I believe now you should start to receive some type of confirmation email. And then after that, it's sort of a waiting game. And you're going to want to just make sure that you are keeping an eye on your inbox. And let's say it surpasses, maybe a month, 2 months, we're getting closer to the summer. Then I would say come and attend a workshop, reach out. If you're working with us here at Savi, we'll actually escalate your case for you and perhaps submit a request through the ombudsman, file a complaint in order to try to get your case moved along faster. So we try to monitor those as much as possible, but it is a bit of a waiting game right now and you got to be patient, but at least getting confirmation that the application has been received. So you're not waiting on nothing. And then I would say, if it starts to surpass 2 months, you've got the great advocates at Student Debt Crisis Center. And like I said, if you're working with us here at Savi, we'll do this automatically. And we'll take, whatever action we need to escalate that so it does get reviewed. So that's what I would say about sort of this FedLoan ordeal.
Yeah, I think the communication delays have been a huge obstacle. I'm also hearing from folks who are just getting blocked by their loan servicer with misinformation or whatever it may be. I will say, as Lindsay said, you can reach out to us at the SDCC. We will certainly do our best to correct that however we can. And the way that is right now is that we're hearing that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the federal watchdog that protects consumers, wants to hear from borrowers who've been blocked by their servicer so that they can do an enforcement action or some other federal oversight effort to correct this. We do need to hear from folks. Even though it's incredibly frustrating, it's an opportunity to maybe use your voice in that frustration to create change. All right, I see we're bumping up against the clock here, so I've got just a few more questions and then we'll have to wrap it up. Question from Mahala. Mahala wants to know if I have applied and have been denied, even though I know my payments were legitimate. How can I have my payment history reviewed again?
Yeah, well, I would say it depends on when you applied. So if you applied and like, I want to be really clear about this. If you applied even in the weeks right after this Pslf waiver announcement was made, so like late October 2021, right after the Department of Education came out with this, we've seen, and again, there's a member on the workshop today who applied right during that period, who was more than eligible, over 120 payments, clearly had the employment for the entire time, and was flat out rejected by FedLoan incorrectly. Like, it was admitted absolutely incorrect. So I would say the first thing that you need to do, depending upon when that was, but whether it was 5 years ago, whether it was in the fall, is resubmit that application. And if it is denied again, then I would say contact us here at Savi, and we will take a look at your payment history and help to escalate the situation from there. But I think the first, unless it was just denied like 2 days ago, the first thing you'd want to do is to resubmit that. And then from there, we can escalate again. But it seems like there was this period right after the announcement was made where borrowers were submitting a ton of applications and FedLoan was still pretty much processing, according to the old rules. I mean, you think it's crazy, like you cannot trust anything when it comes to some of these servicers doing, what they are supposed to do and processing how they should. So it just takes, extra effort to be on top of every little touch point. And if it means submitting, an additional copy of an application, do it. There's only one form, and that's that employment certification form. So you want to make sure they have that, and that triggers the review.
Awesome. I'm going to do just one more question, Lindsay, because I think this one is a prime example of why we're here today, and then we'll unfortunately have to wrap up. But Diana said, I have many payments that should qualify towards public service loan forgiveness, but I've been told by my servicer that I, quote, have an ineligible repayment plan. Does that mean I am disqualified from the new waiver rules? Or is this exactly the kind of situation we're talking about where new repayment plan or the other repayment plans qualify?
Yeah, it sounds like this is something where they might have received that prior to when this Pslf waiver went into effect. So if they were told that they were ineligible because of a repayment plan, then I would again encourage them to resubmit that employment certification form because it should now be re-reviewed. And again, even if you submitted it, October, November of last year, we've seen the evidence that they've been flat out rejected, and that's just been wrong on FedLoan's part. So if that, occurred, you should resubmit. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'll just add, and then we'll wrap up. But Diana, I have over the years heard from so many borrowers who said, I'm a teacher, I'm a nurse, I'm a veteran. I was in an extended repayment plan. I thought that was one of the federal repayment plans. Why don't I qualify? It sounds like you could easily be one of those people that have contacted us over the years and now would benefit from public service loan forgiveness under the waiver and these new rules. So this is a prime example, guys, of someone who had been denied for a legitimate reason, but these new rules have expanded it so that they are well within qualifying factors. So this is really exciting for people like Diana. All right, so that was a lot of information. You will receive tomorrow an automatic email from us that will include a recording. It'll include the link to the Savi tool and some other resources. So stay tuned for that. That should give you everything you need to learn more, to follow up, analyze everything that we talked about today, and hopefully gives you everything you need to be able to apply and qualify. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time on an evening to join us. Thank you, Lindsay, Ian from Savi, and Sam from NextGen. We always appreciate your assistance with these as well. Have a great night.
Thanks, Cody.